Wonderful humans, welcome to the Project Woman Success Stories, where today I am talking to the wonderful Samme Allen, who is the founder of Conference MCs, professional host and speaker. Sam, welcome.
Thanks very much for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure with you, Sam.
Sorry that my technology didn't start as well as we thought, but we'll forget that as a virtual event host.
When does it ever go? When does it ever flow perfectly? It just
Never.
doesn't exist, does it? Never. So I'm going to pass the floor over to you to just tell us about your world, really.
Well, thanks, Abs, for inviting me onto your show. My name is Samme Allen, as you said. I am founder and CEO of a very new business called conferencemcs.com. My background is I'm a professional conference and event host. And those days, as we call them BC, before COVID, I was traveling the world, hosting and designing meetings and events, creating engagement all around the world. Very, very wonderful life to have. And then the pandemic hit, and like many people, or most people in the event industry, I lost my business within about 3 weeks. Had a choice, survive or die, and option 2 wasn't an option. So I retrained. I learned how to design meetings and events online. I learned how to present online. I invested in technology, and came out of that wonderful 2020 with the fledgling part of a new business. The business had soared, and yeah, things were pretty good.
So not much really happened, Sam, to be fair.
That was just 2020, like so yeah.
When you look at all of that, I mean, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? And, you know, the topic of conversation that we're about to embark upon basically helped to cultivate that, didn't it? When we're about to talk about grief and what grief taught you in regards to running, building a business as well as in life. What actually happened?
So yeah, the wonderful pivot in 2020 meant at the back end of the 2020, I started working with a wonderful other human being who we both know very well, Sally Poinsett Nash. I knew I had an inkling of something that needed to grow within this passion I have for hosting, this passion I have for sustainability and diversity. Didn't know what it was. So we started to work together at the back end of 2020 because I figured go large, go big, or go home. If I can make it without sounding like Frank Sinatra, if I can make it in a pandemic, then, I can make it anywhere, right? So we had 2 major holdups in terms of the business excitement, business growth for 2021. The big one was me and my imposter syndrome. And the second one was when I said tongue in cheek, if I lost my dad, who was very fit, very healthy, despite the pandemic, still doing his 10,000 steps every day. And I said, if he was not in my life, he's my best friend, my confidant, my mentor in the business, that would be a hold up. So we sort of laughed it off in December, and I lost him on January the 17th. So we had just started working on the new business plan. I'd started thinking big, and my world disappeared in the space of a phone call, as I'm sure many people will have had similar experiences, not from COVID. He just died. So it was a shock. So shock and grief in 2021 then took over, and yeah, the light went out. I had no interest in running the business, being part of the business. Obviously, if you know anything about presenting, guys, and hosting, it takes a lot of energy and trying to engage people. I didn't want to stand on a stage. I didn't want to be around people, obviously. I didn't. And still to this day, I find delivering quite difficult because it gives me such a great high, helping people engage with content, making and seeing changes of people's behaviors. And the first thing I would do when I get off stage is phone my dad. So, grief and shock and pain just made it, feel like there was no point in doing it. So it consumed me, and the fire went out on everything. But then, as you said, when we started talking, when reflecting, grief has taught me quite a lot too. So it's, as much as there's the downsides. There's obviously things that you can take and learn and grow from.
How did your work support you during this time? You know, and when I say work, I mean the people that you worked with, the environments that you worked within. How did they support this pretty, you know, poignant time in your life?
Well, the irony is, sort of looking back a year and a bit now on, 2 years since lockdown, as we come up to that anniversary, a year and a couple of months since my dad went. I think the entire essence of the business came from this loss. My dad died on the Sunday, and on the Monday, I was due to be delivering a big leadership conference for a global organization. Obviously, I wasn't physically or emotionally able to do that. So I called my very close friend, who's a host. To this day, I can't remember that conversation, but she took over. I'd done all the prep work. She came in, the client was completely understanding, obviously, and she delivered. A second conference happened, and another one of my associates delivered because I was at my dad's funeral. I worked in the background. So the support network from my peer group, my associates and my colleagues and my friends was phenomenal. Even when I wanted to take a step back, they were there sort of almost manning the fort, which is, for those of you who don't know Conference MCs, it's a global network of associates who can run and host and present conferences, events around the world. So without me even knowing it in this time of grief, the beta testing was actually happening with my associates taking on these roles and responsibilities for me. The support from clients was incredible. Again, nobody pushed and put pressure on me, and I just had to go through that pain and see what happened. I read a book, somebody likens grief to a cocoon, and that's just how it was for a lot of the year. And then, I don't know, suddenly someone in the ether kept on pushing, and I'm sure it is my dad, and the opportunities kept on coming, and then the fire started coming back in my belly, but it came back in a different way, much different way.
So what was the biggest thing that you learned about grief and work? And do you feel that there is the right approach currently in supporting grief for individuals? You know, because I speak to a lot of women, especially in regards to the grief of what they find within menopause as well, which is a huge transformation, and they just don't feel that the support is there. You know, the conversation is running, but a lot of women report that it's just lip service and there's no real substance there at present. What's your thoughts on that?
I think there's a couple of things. I think it's, I absolutely know that, I shifted in my hormones. Grief shifts and throws a huge amount of cortisol in your body. I put on weight. I can't shift that weight yet. I'm heading towards, and I started getting hot flushes, which, on top of not sleeping because of the grief, the physical, aspects of being the age that, I am as well. It's taken a toll on my body, so there's a physical thing. I think in terms of grief, you don't know how long it's going to last. You don't know how you're going to feel. I understand. I mean, I'm an independent, I own my own business. So, whilst I could take that time, I don't earn. And I certainly, if I'm booked to deliver on a conference, I can't just suddenly switch it off because I'm missing my dad or I'm hurting. I think that the world still keeps spinning, and I think people who are going through this find that difficult. Businesses still want you to work and send proposals and meet deadlines, and that's sort of a big challenge. But from a flip side and a positive side, before my dad died, I ran another business as well before Conference MCs, and it was like, everything was life or death for me. Work was my life. It took over everything. As I said, traveled a lot. If I wasn't traveling, I was sick. If I wasn't sick, I was packing. If I wasn't packing, I had jet lag. And I look back, and grief has taught me to just now not sweat so much of the small stuff. I still do sweat some of it, but pretty much most of it I don't. In terms of the business now, I think if you feel that pain, that physical pain that you get in an experience like this, I just can't feel that pain again. It's just not going to happen. There's nothing in life that is going to hurt me like that did. So I can't fail. And that's it's an incredibly strange thing to say that, this cocoon, the person who I was on January the 16th, 2021 is gone. That person has gone. And there were some great traits in her, and I'm sure they're still in me. But the person who is running conference MCs in 2021 and beyond now is someone who isn't going to, let work consume. I'm taking care of myself professionally, but also personally. There's things I haven't done because I was holding back, probably to spend time with my dad and my mum and what have you. But now I've really shifted on that in terms of some personal life goals that I've wanted. It's made me realize that there is a real fragility to life. And if I don't start looking after myself, self-care, and doing those things, I can't be a good business person. I can't be a good partner. I can't be a good daughter. So there's been a really positive shift in terms of the strength, and I suppose the being able to drop the stuff that really just doesn't matter because and as a consequence of losing my dad.
I love those two words that stood out there, was consumed. I think that's such a good word, isn't it? Consume, because it does get across exactly what it means. And the fragility, something that I've tuned into over the last couple of days, just really strong words. There's something that you said where you said when you're missing your dad, you can't take that time off work, when you're hurting. But I wonder what the world would be like. I wonder what the business world would be like if you could do that. Because I have experienced similar with you, Sam, when I lost my granddad, and he was my world. Like, we lived with my grandparents when my parents split up, and my granddad just looked after me all the time. He was just my everything. And I remember when I lost him, it felt like the world had been pulled from underneath my feet. But as a young child, I wasn't allowed, not in a nasty way, to fully grieve, because when I grieved, my parents and the grandparents would immediately smother me. Because they couldn't handle that grief themselves. And so, thinking now, what would the world be like if we could just down tools and let it all out? Because when we continuously hold it in, it just lingers, doesn't it? It just tends to linger.
I took some counselling, I took some therapy, not straight away, but probably about 6 months after my dad went, because I just wasn't in control of letting go. I was still very much in a denial phase. And I think, if you were employed, and this was 6 months, and I was still in the shock phase. I still was in this hasn't happened, this can't have happened. And, I'm fortunate enough that, through this, I can, pay for counselling and therapy. I wouldn't have got it, obviously, on the NHS because of the situation, and that's fine. So I had this, and that was an incredible help, an incredible support, helped me realize some of the other things that perhaps also were buttoned in there, because also we get to a certain age and, those things suddenly start popping up. And I think, again, that's been a really positive experience. So I'd say to anybody, if you can, and there are places where there are volunteer help groups as well. That was crucial last year. I think you've got to have support, and I think employees and employers and employees, we need to recognise there are going to be days. My dad's been gone a year and 2 months, and it's still raw. It's when people say time is a great healer. Yeah, I would I'd say it's somebody likened grief to a big ball in a box, and there's a pain button. And at the beginning, that ball is just hitting that pain, the button on the box the whole time because the ball's so big. And then the ball gets smaller as time goes on. But again, because the ball's moving around the box, you don't know when it's going to hit the grief pain button. And I think we have to all recognize it. I think it's kind of difficult in the line of work I do because I'm front and center on a camera or on a stage. I think I'm very lucky with all the clients I work with, you know, I was delivering, you know, a month after for an incredible client, and they all understood and they gave me, you know, huge support. So I think people do, but I also think that as women, and certainly women of a certain age and strong, independent women like us, we're not good at asking. We're not good at saying, you know, and that's been a learning, you know. I've had to ask for help. I've had to say, I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. I've had to say, I feel bad today. And that's just stuff that it's not in my DNA. I'm DNA to say, yeah, everything's fine. And, you know, put that big smile on. And that's what people know me for. So I'm with the smile and the lipstick. And I've had to not be that for a lot of the last year. But you know what? We're still here and lipstick's back on. And I likened it to the day the music stopped for me. You know, again, I'm using all these song lines up, so I sound so corny, but you know, the music did stop. I stopped singing. I sing all the time. I've always sung badly, but I always have. And the singing stopped. And, you know, the positive growth from this is I moved to Spain for a couple of months to see if this has always been a life dream of mine. And I got to go in December and spend a couple of months figuring out whether that could be home. And it was amazing. I was there on the anniversary of my dad's death, and I was in a beautiful place called Valle de la Crin, which is actually called the Valley of Happiness, which I didn't know. I didn't know that was translated. And it was obviously the place I was meant to be. And I think from this experience, you know, that's drawn something really, really positive for me, that, you know, I can make these choices now. And, you know, just picking this random place to be, and it's called the Valley of Happiness. It's like, well, he's pointing me there, or something's guiding me there. And so, yeah, and that last thing is that I can't, you know, I tried to stop working, I tried to be dull. And I think we all just have to say, go find that support, go find those people who are going to support you. 6 months on, a year on, I have an incredible network of ladies called Wine Club Wednesday, and they have been my support, along with some other very close family friends, my mum. You know, you just have to go and reach out, and you have to be okay with saying, I'm not okay. That's probably a toughie, but a biggie.
Sam, to finish our wonderful conversation, if you was looking at the Sam around when your dad passed, what would the advice be that you would offer her as she goes through her grief, as she enters her grief?
Good question. I think I'd sort of say to the Sam and those people who are working so many hours a day, and we know them, we meet them, we met them, you know, we've been networking this week, haven't we? And, you know, people say I'm working till 10 o'clock at night and I'm struggling to see my kids. And yeah, I would just say, really look at what you have and what you might and will lose, and make sure that you've got that balance right, because you can't change once that time's gone. You can't change it. So I would say prioritize and focus on the things that actually really matter. And I know businesses do. It's your life, it's, you know, it's your way of earning, paying the mortgage. But I'd say to the Sam before, you should evaluate what's really important in life and what's going to hurt most. And then to Sam, who was going through the grief, I think that I'd say get counselling, get therapy sooner, and find a professional to help work through this. And I guess that whole thing, I was looking this morning at photos of my dad, and, you know, it's that at some point that pain does lessen. Not gone, but it lessens. And then the good stuff starts coming in, the funny stories, those sort of things. And then the last thing is just ask for help. Don't try and be tough. Don't do what I did. I'm okay. And stick on there. I was also shrouded with the pandemic, so I was able to sort of hide as well of that, rather than because people couldn't come round to the house. But I would say, just don't. Just be you, say who you are, say how you're feeling, whether it's a year, 10 years, 6 weeks, reach out to me if you want to. I've been absolutely through that pain now, so I'd happily support. So yeah, find that support, and you will get through. The sun shines again. And yeah, that's probably the last thing I'd say.
Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you for tuning in and listening. Like Sam says, if you want to reach out to either of us, please feel free to do so. I'll put the links below. And if you are looking for support, why not join me on my Project Wøman workshop on the 28th of March? It would be wonderful to see you there, and the link will be below. Thank you, Sam.
Take care.